In front of you is my Litepro 16-inch Trifold bicycle, which I bought in China. This video I thought I'd give you an overview of my experience with this bicycle. First, an introduction. Second, what's good about it. Third, what's bad about it. Fourth, the upgrades I made. When I came to China, I looked at buying a Brompton. No, too expensive. So this video is focused on what are called Brompton clones. In Asia, Brompton clones are usually sold under the brands Litepro, Mint, Royale, 360, Week 8, etc. They usually come in 3 varieties: internal gears, 3-speed, 6 speeds, external, 7-9 speeds. So I bought this in China. I looked on their 2 biggest shopping online platforms, Taobao and Pinduoduo. And I saw this on fire sale, factory price fire sale, for 1,800 yuan. And the usual starting price would be about 2,700 to 3,000 yuan. So this was about 800 or 900 yuan cheaper than what you normally get. And it was cheaper because it was a lemon. So my first advice to you is do not buy a fire sale factory price, because there's problems with it. The problem with this bicycle can boil down to 2 things. The first thing is chain rub. This chain on the 8th and 9th gear would rub against the frame. No matter what I did with altering the derailleur could change that. The second problem was chain jump. It would jump off on both sides. And the very first time I used it, it jumped off, caught hold of that, and broke the chain. My experience, I should have just paid from the second cheapest price, and although it was an 800 or 900 yuan difference, I spent that, if not a little bit more, trying to fix this by myself. In hindsight, if I started from scratch again, went back in time, I probably would have saved about maybe 300, 400 yuan if I started from scratch. So let's start with what's good about this bicycle. The first is the seat post. I'm 183 centimeters tall and weigh about 93 kilograms. So I expected to change the seat post for a higher version. But it wasn't necessary, it's tall enough. And I like that it has a measure guide on the back, which makes it easier for you to remember the height you should have it. The second thing I liked is the saddle. It's not the best saddle, but it was softer than I expected and it's not hard. The third thing I liked was the color scheme. It has this red, purple, blue, pink color scheme. My previous folding bicycles were silver. I would still recommend silver because this color shows every single scratch and nick, and you will get plenty of nicks and scratches. Silver simply makes it less visible. The next thing I like about this bicycle was the handle grips. It's fake leather, soft, comfortable. I also like that it's an M bar, but that's a preference. The other thing I liked were the brakes. Both the rear and front brakes are responsive and they bite pretty well. So I was actually surprised with that. The other thing I liked was the gear shifter. Full metal, good quality, nice and clicky, responsive. Let's move on to what I don't like, the bad. The first is the rear rack. It's too small. So the rear rack that came with this bicycle was this one. Length was about 17 centimeters. Too small, again, that's a preference. The second thing I didn't like, the easy wheels. They're too narrow, a little bit small, 58 millimeters. I think you would look at about 60 millimeters. And if you use the easy wheels a lot, the screw will start to unscrew and it could fall off if you don't pay attention. The next thing I didn't like is the wheel rub against the mudguard. There's very little space here between the tire and the mudguard. So the tires, everything about this bike was standard, base model. And the PSI with the standard tire is about 80 PSI. And ideally you should have 120 PSI with the back wheel and the front wheel about 100. If you pump it up to about 100, which is the maximum I feel comfortable pushing this, the problem with that is it really rubs from about 80 PSI. So I really had to adjust this mudguard so it wouldn't rub. The next one was the derailleur. So the derailleur that came with this bicycle is the Trifold Fold B, which is 9-speed. And I found it's a bit noisy, clicky, and a little bit jumpy. The next thing, the pedals. So the standard bass pedal that came with this bicycle, I found was very chunky. This is a fold-in pedal, and I also found there was quite a bit of friction when you used it. Again, it's a preference. I think if you don't care, this is okay. The next thing was the gear shifter. Although I like the quality, I like the responsiveness. The problem I found with this gear shifter is when it connects onto the handlebar. Although your finger can easily use the front knob, the top knob, when it's under the handlebar, is not easily accessible. So you can't easily use your finger at the top to access it and use it. So you kind of have to look and kind of wedge your finger under to click it. So it's not intuitive. You always have to be on the lookout for it. So good quality, it's just difficult to access this knob. And the final thing that irritated me was the height of the steering post. I'm 183, it's just a little bit too short by about that much. So I prefer a straight posture. So with the handlebar being at that height, you have to slouch forward. Again, it's a preference. If you prefer a bent slouch posture, no problem. If you're below maybe 175, 177, you won't have a problem. Moving on to upgrades. I made 23 upgrades to this bicycle. Some of them are just optional, but some of them I highly recommend. So let's start at the back of the bicycle and move our way forward. The first upgrade, I added a rechargeable rear light. So when you move, it flashes. Next, based on Brompton groups, they recommend changing easy wheels to Omni wheels. So the problem is when you park this bike, you fold the wheel under it, it can move forward and backwards easily. But if you have to move it from left to right to position it correctly, you have to pick it up. So what Omni wheels do, they move forward, but they can also move from side to side, with these wheels. My experience with Omni wheels, not impressed, based on the following problem. Now, you should ideally replace all 4 easy wheels with 4 Omni wheels. But the problem is, when you pedal, it's very easy for the back of your foot or shoe to brush the easy wheels. And with Omni wheels being wider, it'll guarantee a hit. So either you have to live with the easy wheels, or somehow ride in a fashion that you don't brush the Omni wheels. Now, continuing with the problem of parking, if you fold it, the one option you can do if you don't want to continually have to fold the back wheel when parking is to get a kickstand. You can get the Litepro, you can get the Tiparts kickstand. They're all terrible. Why? This bike is very easy to topple. Why is that? The post is not long enough. I don't know why manufacturers don't make a longer post. There's 2 hacks. The first hack is behind you there's a screw that fastens the post to the upper post. You can drill another hole through the back and then move the screw there, and then you can just push this out 3 centimeters, screwed in place. That improves matters. You can also add a plastic foot like I did. That just gives you a little bit extra. I don't know why manufacturers don't solve this problem, but it's just disappointing. All this is good for is if you quickly have to park, you can use a kickstand. But if you park in an area where it might be touched, people might bump your bicycle with their bicycle, it will fall over. Alright, next. Like I said, I wasn't happy with the rear rack. As I said before, it was just too small, so I replaced the 17 centimeter rear rack with a 30 centimeter rear rack. It's optional. For you it might not be important, for me it is. Alright, moving on to the cassette and derailleur. For me, 9 speed's too much. I prefer 6 speed. So what I did is I downgraded from a 9-speed cassette to a 7-speed Litepro cassette, which has size 10 cogs. It is starting from 11 teeth up to 28. Now what I did is, to avoid the chain rub, I left 2 cogs, 2 11 size cogs on the side, or 11 and 12, and so I don't use those so it doesn't rub. Of course, if you buy a Litepro that works properly, you won't have that problem. I also changed the derailleur. In the beginning I had a Fold B LT Woo derailleur. Didn't like it. Clicks, skips, doesn't index well. So I thought, right, let me upgrade it when I changed to a 7-speed to a 7-speed Fold A LT Woo. Also, skips, jumps, not good. Heavy, big. So I wasted about 100 yuan on that. And then I went for a Litepro 2-part derailleur system. Works much better. Unlike the LT Woo, that's a 2-in-1. This is a 2-part. First part connects there, second part screws in there. Works much better. The pulleys, I think it's a 10 and an 8 tooth pulley wheel. I'm thinking of upgrading the pulley wheel up here from an 8 tooth to a 10 tooth, so maybe it bites a bit better. Other thing I had to do, you have to look at the cable. This cable on the other side was touching the chain, so I moved the brake cable over here. Also, with cables, there's a cheap but useful plug-in cable holder. Plug it in there, use a zip tie to connect it, and there's an arm that grips the brake cable and the transmission cable. Cheap, effective. One thing I would highly recommend, especially if you park the bicycle by folding the wheel, is this. It's a Litepro easy wheel extender. The problem is this bike is easy to topple, and if you want to park it or use it on a sidewalk or wheel it through an airport, it's not very steady. So what the extender does is it pops out the wheel, it extends the wheelbase so it's wider. This makes it far more easy to wheel around, far more secure, and if you park it, it really does a good job at not preventing the bicycle from toppling over. So I recommend this. Moving on, the other thing I did to try to prevent rubbing and wearing of the frame is you get these little rubber protectors, which I have on my cables. Simple, cheap, clips on, protects your frame. Highly recommend it. Alright, the other optional thing is if you find that the seat is a bit hard, is you can buy a cushion that goes over the seat or make it more comfortable. Moving on to the pedals. Like I said, this was too chunky, too heavy, too much friction for me. So what I did is I upgraded to the Liteplus, which is Litepro. It's also foldable. It's lightweight and it's less friction. Again, another thing I did, as I said before, I bought these frame protectors which clip onto the cable so it doesn't rub off the paint. The next thing I would highly recommend is when you have this clamp system, when you unscrew and you want to fold the bicycle, the clamp can often become loose and you have to wiggle it back in place. There's a cheap solution. It's a spring that you buy with a plastic outer, and you just connect it in there. And what it does is, as you unscrew, it keeps the clamp from falling off, turning around. It just makes it much easier, much faster to use. And so I recommend buying one for the central clamp and also the clamp over here. Then those that like to use a basket or a bag that slots into the front socket. Sometimes it can be irritating or time consuming just to have to go here and push the lever to release it. What you can do is buy a strap that when you want to disconnect the bag, you just pull it. Then, and also to prevent cable rub from damaging the paint, there's just a simple protector that you screw on here so that the cable will rub against that and not against the fork. Moving up, as I said, my problem is that the handlebar was just a little bit too low. So what you can remedy that is buy an extender that connects to the bottom and connects to the handlebar, which gives you about that much more space. So that's what I did. And then I also bought these plugs that screw in on the side to fill up the gap. Right, moving up. As I said, good quality gear shifter, but I like to know which gear I'm in. So I bought an LT Wu gear shifter that shows which gear you're in, and what I like about this is that it's easily usable. So you have your brakes, you can press the forward knob and the back knob. So with these 3 fingers you can do all 3 things: brake, change gear, and see the gear. So that's what I did. Now I thought of changing these handle grips, because if you're always in that position it can be bad for your wrist. What I did is from Litepro I bought one of these. The problem is it's too long. This part cannot grip onto there. So if you have a straight bar, no problem, you can just shift the gear changer and the brake clamp more to the side and slide it over. Nice quality from Litepro. I just didn't measure it properly. This would be nice because this extra addition would protect your wrist and put it into a better position. Continuing. The standard model came with just a simple plastic plug which you put on the side. Nothing wrong with it. I decided to upgrade to a Litepro metal end cap. Nothing wrong with this. I just did this for visual means. Next, the problem is when I bought this gear changer, the brakes levers were not at the right angle. It was thrust up. So I upgraded to Litepro brake levers. It's thinner, it sits in a better position, and it's easily accessible because you have the brake cable connect there and not inside. So the standard brake lever has the connection point inside here, which is not easily accessible, and also it sticks. This one doesn't stick, it's easier to take out. So I upgraded to Litepro brake levers. I bought a speedometer. I have to say, it doesn't work very well because the connection point, the distance from the computer to the sensor is a bit too long. So if you do buy a computer for your bicycle, make sure to read the specifications about the distance, the maximum distance from the computer to the sensor. This is a little bit too short, so 80% of the time it doesn't connect. Then the standard model does not come with a bell. I bought a previous bell, wasn't happy with it. I'm happy with the simple one. And bought a mirror. Gives just enough space. You must double check that there's enough clearance for your hand between the handlebar and the mirror. This is just enough. Which brings me to the last upgrade. And I do a lot of shopping, and that leads me to a basket. You also get bags. I found this online. It's big. And if you just connect it here, it snaps in the front. So you can fit about 2 shopping bags in here, maximum weight 10 kilograms. My recommendation is if you see this bag, go for the smaller version. I think this is too big. With 2 bags, the bike's a bit unsteady. So the smaller version of this is better. So those are the upgrades I made to this bicycle. So that was my journey with my Litepro and some of the upgrades and changes that I made. What I would advise, if you want more advice, you can check on YouTube for users such as Chris My Bike. And in Singapore, there are many good groups on YouTube devoted to Litepro and its other brands. So I advise check them out.